Welcome into another NFL Power Rankings. This video is going to be a little bit different from recent videos I've posted if you've been watching my channel, and that's because I've been having some editor issues. And so while I look for a new editor, I'm just going to be basically doing this like a podcast where I'm just going to talk through. It's going to be one straight shot, and I'm going to screw up sometimes, and hopefully it's just a little bit fun. And in the future, hopefully I can find an editor, or if you all enjoy this style more, maybe we just keep it like this. Now, if you're a fan of the NFL, remember I do these videos every Thursday and Saturday, all NFL season long. So if you're a fan of the NFL, you'll love this channel. Remember to like and subscribe to help us grow. Now, let's get on with the actual main chunk of our video, i.e. the power rankings. And so you can see here, this is our bottom 12 teams. The bottom 12 teams remains, frankly, unchanged from last week. And that's just because, yeah, these are the bottom 12 teams. There's nothing that special to be said. Yes, the Tennessee Titans got a good win against the Texans, but they're not moving from last place all the way into the mid-10. Not going to happen. I gave the Cowboys a little bit of a leg up after they beat the Commanders, which is a nice win. But they're still starting Cooper Rush at quarterback. This team is still going nowhere fast, especially if Mike McCarthy and Jerry Jones are running the operation. So it's tough to put them at the same level as some of those teams in the middle 10. And yeah, these teams moving around a little bit, but at the end of the day, there's nothing special to say about any of them. I don't think any of them are knocking on the door of the playoffs, with the lone exception maybe being the Indianapolis Colts. But that's mostly just because their division is absolutely awful. And if the Texans keep stumbling like they have been recently, the Colts might be able to complete for the playoffs, but it's unlikely. Now, after that, we're moving into our middle 10 teams. And our middle 10 teams, again, remain fairly unchanged, with the exception being that the Cardinals and Commanders have both dropped out of our top 10 into the 12th and 11th spot. The Commanders, I kept in the top 10, even though they were on a 2-game losing streak last week, but that was primarily because the Commanders' 2 losses were to the Eagles and to the Steelers, 2 teams that are very good. But this past week, they lost to the Cowboys, and I mean, come on, that's it. You are not a top 10 team if you've lost 3 straight games, and any one of them is to the Dallas Cowboys and Cooper Rush. Like, that was a brutal game from the Commanders. Jaden Daniels had a decent game in fantasy game, but that primarily came at the back end of the game. The majority of the game, the Cowboys just shut them down. And so the Commanders, they just aren't as good as we might have thought they were a few weeks ago. This is still a much improved unit over what we expected them to be coming into the season. But they're just not an elite unit like they looked like when they were 7-2 just a few short weeks ago. The Cardinals, on the other hand, they lost 16-6 to the Seahawks, who you'll see here moved up a couple of spots. And in general, the entire NFC West is in this middle 10 teams. You got the Rams, 49ers, Seahawks, and Cardinals, because all these teams could win that division. It is a super tight, close division. I still like the Cardinals to come out of it the most right now, but the 49ers are still easily the most talented team in that division. And if they can get their shit together, then they can definitely end up winning this division. But none of these teams are bad. None of these teams are good. And I honestly think whoever wins the division will have a tough run against either the Packers or the Vikings, or heck, maybe even the Lions, in the wild card round. Okay, well, that's it for the most part for our middle 10. And now let's move into our top 10. Starting out at number 10, we have the Los Angeles Chargers moving up 1 spot from last week in our power rankings. The Los Angeles Chargers, you might question why they're up this high. I mean, they literally lost on Monday Night Football by 7 points to the Baltimore Ravens, and realistically, it wasn't even 7 points. They were down by 14 points. They scored a touchdown basically at the end of the game, failed to convert the onside kick, and that's why it was only 7 points. But I'm still moving up the Chargers for 2 reasons. One, I said it last week. The Chargers should have been in my top 10 last week. I just didn't feel like I could knock out the Commanders or the Cardinals, because the Cardinals were on a 4-game winning streak and were on bye that week. And the Commanders, yeah, had 2 straight losses, but those losses were to the Steelers and Eagles at the time. Both very reasonable losses for a good team to have. Whereas with those teams losing this past week to not as great competition, the Chargers still lost, but they lost to significantly better competition in the Baltimore Ravens. And so those 3 teams were super close last week, But the Chargers were able to leapfrog their way up to number 10 this week because they looked better than the Cardinals and Commanders did. And they're still 7-4, which is a pretty darn good record. And they're higher in the division than our number 9 team, the Denver Broncos, at 7-5. Yeah, the Broncos are behind the Chargers in the AFC West, but the Broncos have just looked like a better team. Since October, the Broncos have been one of the best units in all of football. I mean, their defense has been dominant all year, and Bo Nix has picked it up and, frankly, might be the Rookie of the Year, which would have been crazy to say a month ago with how Jaden Daniels was playing. But Bo Nix has kept playing great. Jaden Daniels has fallen off a little bit, and Bo Nix has the Broncos in a playoff spot right now, and they're looking like a pretty competent playoff team. Yeah, they're going to be third in the wild card race because you have the Ravens at 1 and the Chargers at 2. But, like, who's chasing the Broncos? The Miami Dolphins, who are down at, 4 wins? They might have 5. I don't know. Either way, I think the Broncos have more than a good amount of room between them and the Dolphins. So I'm taking the Broncos to be a really good team. They belong here at number 9. And Bo Nix, you know what? He might win Rookie of the Year. And it just goes to show you that QB rankings don't always mean a lot in the draft. A lot of people are saying that Bo Nix was trash, that he couldn't do anything. He shouldn't have been a first-round pick. I mean, he was the 6th quarterback off the board, but clearly the Broncos and Sean Payton saw something in him. They knew he was one of the most NFL-ready guys, and it shows. Even if he doesn't have the same ceiling as guys like Drake May, Michael Penix Jr., J.J. McCarthy, etc., he's still really good. And if you get competent quarterback play for a decade from Bo Nix, even if it's not exceptional, you can build a team around that. Look no further than the Lions and Jared Goff. I don't think Jared Goff is an elite quarterback. He is just a very competent quarterback who you can build a really good team around. And that's what Bo Nix can be for this Denver Broncos team. And imagine how good this Denver Broncos team can be once they get the Russell Wilson contract off their books come the 2026 season, when they still have Bo Nix on his rookie contract for a couple more years after that. That'll be dangerous. Or should I say, dangerous. Okay, that was a bad joke. Either way, with that bad joke out of the way, let's move on to number 8. We got the Green Bay Packers. This is where the truly elite teams start, in my opinion. Not to say anything negative about the Broncos and the Chargers, but I think starting at number 8, these are the teams that I truly believe can actually compete for a Super Bowl. It's the top 25% of teams, and all these teams, if things break right, could absolutely win a Super Bowl in 2024, in my estimation. That's something that I don't totally say about the Chargers and the Broncos, because I think they're still a little bit away from being at that caliber. But the Green Bay Packers, they're a really good football team. Jordan Love is back and healthy. They have a ton of receivers. Josh Jacobs is great. The defense is solid. There's not a lot bad to say about the Packers. The only negative thing I can say is they don't really have elite talent anywhere. They have good to very good talent seemingly everywhere, but I'm not sure if they have a game breaker. And pretty much every team remaining on this list has at least one game breaker, which I think is what drops the Packers down to number 8 on this list. But it's not a bad thing to have a really well-rounded team, even if you don't have that one super stud on your roster. And so the Green Bay Packers are absolutely a competitive football team, but they're going to have to win by playing team football as opposed to having one player put the team on his back. Next up at number 7, you have the Minnesota Vikings. And if you need to ask who that game-changing player is for the Minnesota Vikings, you don't know football and you don't know wide receivers because, Jettas. That's all you got to say. Now, Justin Jefferson has not been that effective in recent weeks for the Minnesota Vikings. Trust me, I know. I made a trade for Justin Jefferson in fantasy, and that trade has basically kiboshed my entire season because he's played like ass since I made the trade. Oh well, at least my one other fantasy league's doing well. I should get a bye, but still, I'm pissed off about Jettas because he ruined my fantasy season, but he's still a phenomenal wide receiver. And with him, along with Addison, who was a stud this past week against the Chicago Bears, TJ Hawkinson's back from injury. The defense under Brian Flores has been legit all season long. The Vikings are 9-2 and are a very good team. You might ask why I've knocked them down from number 6, even though they are 9-2, which is one of the best records in the NFL. And it's because while they're on a 4-game winning streak, That 4-game winning streak has not given me a ton of confidence in the Minnesota Vikings. Those 4 games, in no particular order, were against the Chicago Bears, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Tennessee Titans, and the Indianapolis Colts. Guess what? All 4 of those teams are in my bottom 12, and the Vikings were in very tight matchups against all 4 of them. Yes, they won all 4 of those games, but they didn't show me the team that I saw earlier in the season. Like, this team beat the Green Bay Packers. They dominated the Houston Texans. They barely lost to the Detroit Lions. The Vikings were really, really good early on in the season in showing that they deserve to be one of the best teams. But since they lost a couple games, yeah, they're on a bit of a win streak again, but these haven't been the most convincing wins. Sam Darnold hasn't been as dominant of a quarterback. And I worry that once the Vikings have to play high-level competition again as the season goes on and into the playoffs, they just won't be able to recreate their early season magic. And so while they're a good team who can beat bad teams, I'm not totally convinced they're a good team that can beat good to great teams consistently. And so that's why, even though they're 9-2, they're number 7 on my power rankings. But again, they're still really good. Don't sleep on the Vikings. They can still beat almost anybody in this league. At number 6, we got the Baltimore Ravens. They are 8-4. They won on Monday Night Football against the Chargers. They still have their bye week to come in week 14, which is an incredibly late bye week that some of these teams have. Jesus Christ. Like, how does you have bye weeks that late? Like, if you're playing fantasy football, you're basically the final week before playoffs, and you got guys on bye. That's nuts. But hey, the NFL apparently doesn't care about fantasy football. They just care about their revenues and making sure there's 4 or 6 teams on bye come week 14. And sure, whatever, NFL. I guess that's what we're doing now. But either way, the Baltimore Ravens have been hit or miss this season. Some weeks they look like the best team in football. Other weeks, basically anybody can beat them. They're a team that tends to play down to their opponents. They do end up winning a lot of games against solid teams. Like, heck, they beat the Chargers pretty handily this past week. But they've also lost to the Browns and Raiders. I don't know how many times I have to say that. And so this team is certainly competitive, but I'm not convinced they have the ability to beat some of the other AFC elite teams like the Chiefs and like the Steelers. And if you can't beat those teams, it's going to be a tough slog come the playoffs if you end up matching up against them. And at number 5, you have the Ravens' divisional rival, the Pittsburgh Steelers. And you might ask why the Steelers are above the Ravens. And I just couldn't find any justification to move the Steelers below the Ravens, even though the Ravens beat the Chargers this past week and the Steelers lost to the Browns. And it's because, guess what? While the Ravens beat the Chargers, the Steelers have beat the Chargers earlier this season. And while the Steelers lost to the Browns, I mean, so did the Ravens earlier this season. And in the head-to-head, the Steelers won that head-to-head. They're leading the division. They have a better record. And so I just can't really justify putting the Ravens higher than the Steelers in these power rankings. And so the Steelers end up at number 5, primarily just because I couldn't put them below the Ravens, but I wanted to bump the Ravens up to number 6. So that's how we ended with the Steelers here at 5. I think the Steelers will win this division, which will make it really interesting. I think the Ravens getting a win against the Chargers is actually massive for them because it also means that they're in the first wildcard spot right now, which likely means you get to go on the road against the Texans, the only easy road matchup that there is in the AFC. Elsewise, you got to go against, theoretically, the Steelers or the Ravens, whoever wins that division, the Bills, or the Chiefs. Like, none of those are easy, but the Texans, yeah, that's kind of easy with how they've been playing lately. Now we're moving on to number 4, and it's the Kansas City Chiefs at 10-1, falling 2 spots in spite winning on Sunday of Week 12. And the reason I'm knocking them down 2 spots is because when they lost to the Bills, I thought that'd be a bit of a wake-up call. They allowed 30 points, but they were getting to go against the Panthers and Bryce Young. I mean, come on. If there's an easy win, that's an easy win. And the comment I've been making all year about the Chiefs is that their defense is elite. And their defense is holding teams to very low point totals. And so Patrick Mahomes in the offense just hasn't had to do much. And when they do have to put up points, they've successfully put up points. And that's why I kept them so high for so long in the season. I kept them at number 1, even with what the Lions and Bills were doing. I kept them at number 2 last week, even though they lost to the Bills, who a lot of people put above the Chiefs after that win. But they went against the Panthers, and it's not that they were in a close game and had to win by a last-second field goal, because that happens. That's fine. We all have bad games. The Chiefs have had a number, but managing to win is an important factor in the NFL. The reason I'm knocking the Chiefs down is because their defense allowed 27 points. The reason the Chiefs are so high is because their defense is elite, and they have Patrick Mahomes, who, even if the rest of his supporting cast isn't doing much, he can put the team on his back enough to get enough points to cover what his defense will give him. But when you allow 27 points to the Carolina Panthers, the argument of the Chiefs have an elite defense goes out the window. And given we haven't seen enough from the offense of the Chiefs to say that this unit is still the elite of the elite, if their defense isn't shutting teams down consistently, I cannot put this team as high as number 2. They have to fall to number 4, because there are 3 teams that have been dominant seemingly on both sides of the football that I just can't argue the Chiefs are better than right now. And so that brings us to one of those 3 teams. At number 3, we got the Philadelphia Eagles at 9-2, moving up 2 spots from number 5. You know, the Philadelphia Eagles are weird, because if you told me coming into the season that Jalen Hurts would be like mid, maybe a bit above average, I would not have expected the Eagles to be number 3 on our power rankings, especially with what we saw from them last year. Yeah, they added Saquon, who we knew would be good because, I mean, come on, Miles Sanders and DeAndre Swift were good in this offense. Of course Saquon Barkley was going to be good. Anyone who didn't think Saquon Barkley was going to be good in this offense, what were you doing? What are you talking about? We all knew it was going to be the case. The only thing we didn't know is if he'd be good for fantasy because of Jalen Hurts stealing touchdowns with a tush push. And guess what? He's still doing that, and the Eagles are still dominating, and Saquon Barkley is still like the best fantasy running back because he just runs it in from 70 yards twice this past week. Like, the Eagles are insane offensively, literally because of Saquon, even though Jalen Hurts, I think, has been nothing special. The receivers have been all right. Like, A.J. Brown is good, but not as good as you maybe wanted him to be. Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert have been a little bit disappointing, but Saquon's basically carried this offense, and the defense has been phenomenal. Like, the Eagles' defense has been one of the best units in football this year, which is shocking given what we saw from them last year. And the combination of those 2 things has made the Eagles an absolute force in the NFC and the NFL all told. Like, the Eagles are going to be one of the toughest outs. You could argue that they're the best team in football right now, and even though I have them at number 3, I'd accept that argument. I think it's a fair argument. If someone came up to me and said, I think the Eagles are the best, I'd say, I disagree, but I totally see how you got there. And if Jalen Hurts in the passing game can get to a point where they are what we saw in 2022, then, I mean, it's GG's. The Eagles are the best team in the league. The only reason they're not is because I haven't seen enough from their passing game to say that they can win a shootout or win from behind if they're going up against a really good offense and really good unit, which I think we have in our number 2 and number 1 seeds in this power ranking. And so let's show you who those are. At number 2, we got the Buffalo Bills. And the Buffalo Bills were on bye this past week. They did move up 1 spot in the power ranking, but that's basically just because I knocked the Chiefs down 2 spots because I wanted to move the Eagles ahead of them. I'm not knocking the Bills. They were on bye. You can't knock them, but this team is good. Are they as complete as the Philadelphia Eagles are? Absolutely not. I would take pretty much everything the Eagles have over what the Bills have. I would take defensive line of the Eagles. Linebacker, when Matt Milano comes back, questionable, but for now, of the Eagles. Defensive backs of the Eagles. Offensive line of the Eagles. Receivers of the Eagles. Running back of the Eagles. Maybe not kicker because Jake Elliott hasn't been that great, but whatever. That's just kicker. But the one area where the one area where the Buffalo Bills triumph is quarterback. Josh Allen has been so good this season. His picks are down. He's running the ball effectively when he needs to. He's using his running game well. His receivers are getting healthier. Like, Amari Cooper should be integrated into this team off the bye. Keon Coleman going to be coming back. Khalil Shakir is doing his thing, as are Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid. This team is really good, and Josh Allen is just that level of quarterback that can take a good team and make them great. And so while the Eagles are certainly a more complete team than the Bills, I do not deny that. The reason the Bills are higher on this list is because Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. And that's it. And on to number 1 in our power rankings, we have the Detroit Lions. They are 10-1. They are on a 9-game winning streak. They seemingly dominate every team they play. The Lions have been the best team in football this season. I basically haven't seen a single power ranking that doesn't have the Detroit Lions at number 1. Some people might argue the Philadelphia Eagles, primarily Eagles fans, but still, the Detroit Lions are a dominant team. They're number 1. Need I say more? Let's move along to picking our Thursday and Friday matchups. And so starting off, we do have the Lions hosting a Thanksgiving game where they haven't won since 2016. The Chicago Bears are coming to town, and the Lions are favored by 10.5 points. We were talking about this on stream this past week. 10.5 points is insane to favor the Lions for, especially when the Lions have injury designations like missing practice on David Montgomery, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Taylor Decker, Khalif Raymond, Carlton Davis. Like, there are injuries galore in Detroit, and they have been on a good win streak, but have always struggled against the Chicago Bears. Look at last year, what the Bears were compared to the Lions, and look at how close those games were. The Bears have put up good fights against the Packers and the Vikings in the past 2 weeks. I think they could get over the hump and beat the Lions. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm a Lions fan. It's at home. Even though the Lions haven't won since 2016, I'm still picking the Lions to win. But if you're asking me against the spread, Lions by 10.5 points, I am slamming the Bears button to cover that spread. And if you're not, you have not watched enough Lions and Bears football games. Well, the Lions have dominated, and they could cover that spread. There's no doubt about it. They could. The Bears are not as bad a football team as a lot of people think. They've always had the Lions number. It's a divisional rivalry. It's a short week, which makes it really difficult to truly prepare. And when the Lions have such a coordinator advantage, a Thursday night football game really hurts them. So I'm taking the Lions to win, but I'm certainly taking the Bears on spread. Our next matchup is the Giants and the Cowboys. And can we skip this game? Like, honestly, Tommy DeVito versus Cooper Rush on Thanksgiving. Usually people historically have hated that the Lions always play on Thanksgiving. Let's be clear. This is the bad Thanksgiving game. This is a horrendously bad Thanksgiving game, and I'm going to be streaming it, but God, do I not want to. I mean, the Giants have been pathetically bad, but so too have the Cowboys. I'm going to pick the Cowboys for 2 reasons. 1, they're at home, and 2, I mean, Tommy DeVito is so bad, and the Giants were so bad this past week against the Buccaneers. I think that the Cowboys can do enough to win this game, especially now that Micah Parsons is back and the defense looks at least, serviceable as a unit. So they'll be able to potentially shut down Tommy DeVito and whomever the hell else the Giants are running out there. So Cowboys win, but God, hopefully you're having dinner during this game and you can just skip it, even though I won't. And then our final night game for the Thanksgiving slate, the 3 games, is the Dolphins at the Packers. I think this is another really good game. I think the Lions and the Bears will also be a really good game, honestly, just because the Lions' injuries and the rivalry there. But this will be really good, too. The big question is going to be, how do the Miami Dolphins perform in the elements? Because this is in Green Bay. It's probably going to be really freaking cold in Lambeau Field. And we've seen historically how this Miami Dolphins team shrinks when they're in cold weather. And it's because of that I'm picking the Green Bay Packers. I acknowledge this is a much bigger must-win game for the Miami Dolphins than it is for the Green Bay Packers. But the Miami Dolphins, I don't see them being able to successfully fend against the cold. The Green Bay Packers are at least more used to it, and I think they'll be able to pull it off at home on a short week because, Tua can't play in cold. And then we also have the Thursday football game, which is the Las Vegas Raiders visiting the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm going to say this game is very similar to the Lions and the Bears game. Why? Well, because the Kansas City Chiefs are favored by 13.5 points. 13.5 points. I understand that it's either Aiden O'Connell or Desmond Ridder starting at quarterback for the Raiders, and I mean, neither's great given they're both downgrades to Gardner Minshew. who's also not great. But still, like, the Raiders being 13.5-point underdogs to the Chiefs, who basically can't win games by less than one possession, is crazy. And so, of course, I'm picking the Chiefs to win this game. I'd be shocked if the Raiders can go on the road and beat the Chiefs. But against the spread, oh, I am 100% taking the Las Vegas Raiders to cover this spread. No question about it. They should be able to do that easily because the Kansas City Chiefs just play down to their opponents this year. And so, Chiefs to win, but Raiders to cover the spread. And so that's it for our weekly power rankings and 4 picks this week because it's Thanksgiving week. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, remember to leave a like and comment down below. Help us out, help us grow. And, let me know if you like this more podcast style. Obviously, there was a few hiccups throughout, but I don't think it was too bad. And if you like it, we'll keep it as is. If you don't like it, well, I'm looking for an editor anyway, and hopefully I find one soon. Either way, I hope you all enjoy the Thursday slate of games, and I'll talk to you all on Saturday for our weekly pick'ems for the rest of the games. Peace!